I'm starting the recording. Welcome everybody to Wednesday of CO 300, week 8. We are looking at critical information literacy. Oh boy, time out. Ooh, I say the words critical information literacy, and the wind comes in, and the smoke comes in, and okay. So we are doing two things. We're looking at critical information literacy, ideally from a practical perspective to give you tools to better assess the information that you encounter and to give you more confidence in approaching information in the world. Not only in your research techniques of out there, but also in your own internal self-investigation techniques of how you're looking at the information that you're seeing. That's the harder one. And then we're going to relate that to the potential research topics and do more brainstorming and talking about those research topics. So what I'd like to do is open up our notes and ask you, what is critical information literacy? We know what literacy is, and this is on the video that I posted for this week from last semester. But just in case, just to get us on the same page, and for our notes here, share screen. Thanks for being here. Critical information literacy. What is critical information literacy? Can we say that in our own words?
Would it be like the ability to only take out the important information? Or to find them?
Somewhat. So partially. We do have, I think this is a connected idea, but it is a little different. I would say that good reading skills is about identifying what's important and pulling out what's important from a larger text. We could also say that good reading is also, so one of the ways of understanding good reading is, you're exactly right, it's basically like a skill of selection, identifying what's important. You could also think about in terms of critical thinking is partially what we think about that in terms of understanding context of a reading. So, right, texts don't happen in isolation. They happen with a whole other host of like social and cultural, historical things. Con is Latin for with. So context literally just means with the text. But that isn't quite what we mean by critical information literacy. We know what literacy is, right? So it's not just the ability to read, but also the ability to read and write. There's a certain, anybody else want to take a stab at what critical information literacy means as specifically as possible, or does that mean anything to us already? All right, well, welcome to the freaking, we're gonna get crazy here. Critical, when you see critical in this sense, I'm just gonna cut right to the jugular and say this is about understanding power relations and how power relations inform texts. Texts do not happen in a vacuum. There is a sense of power that in a lot of senses creates the kinds of texts that we see. If you would like to read more on this, I would highly recommend, this came up in our first week of class, but Foucault's idea, Michel Foucault, my French is horrible, I don't know how to say his first name. He has a theory of power knowledge that I would highly recommend you looking at if you don't know. This is basically follows Nietzsche's idea of the genealogy of ideas, or the genealogy of morals, where if you can take any idea at all, for example, one of the main examples he gives is mental institutions, and asks, where did our idea of mental institutions come from? When did that start? Or, you could call it the nut house. When did people start doing that? At what point in time did we start putting, and by we, I mean Western culture derived from Europe, it's going to be very different treating insane people if we are in indigenous communities or in other tribal communities that are non-European or non-Western. But Foucault and other theorists, but he's the main one, is looking at how power instantiates knowledge or creates knowledge to basically further itself in some kind of a way. And anything we look at, not just mental institutions, he also looks at our sexual ethics as well. So our ideas of what is okay sexually and not are culturally and historically situated. Basically, information doesn't just exist in a vacuum. So when we say critical in this sense means that we're looking at the power relations behind the text. This is the incentives that people have to publish certain information. So information in the world is not neutral. It comes with an agenda. Now, does anybody have a problem with that? I should back up, because this is a very interesting point potentially.
I think the non-grasping mind has no agenda theoretically. So like,
Great.
I don't. Yeah.
One plus one equals two. True or false?
What's your angle? What are you getting at?
Yeah, no. Okay, so I'm trying to think of, or how about, here's maybe a better one. Is anybody paying attention to the CO2 parts per million calculator? Oh, right. We've crossed 400. Amazing. $410. Oh, and no, wait. I don't even know. Wait, can I trust this information? What the? Who is? I don't want chart. I want real time. I don't want images. Aha, climate.gov. Can I trust them? Jason says yes.
I mean, maybe, unless you don't trust the government, then maybe
Oh,
not.
but that's exactly the problem, Jason. I don't trust the government.
Then tread wisely.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's kind of what we're trying to figure out, how the fuck we should do that now. If I don't trust the information that I'm getting, this is Dana Boyd's point. I don't know. Did anybody get to read Dana Boyd's article before class today? Okay. She says that she had been teaching basically all her students that they need to be really wary of the information they're receiving. That if we're going to, so let me back up. I am, oh yeah, this is, let me back up. This is Okay. Critical information literacy is just our ability to read and process information and understand where it comes from and whether we can trust it. And the sense of being critical is the sense of understanding the incentives behind the publication of any information. What incentives does climate.gov have? And interestingly, they say, or they're trying to be clear about what their incentives are in the Science and Information for Climate Smart Nation. Do they have an agenda?
I think there's some performative aspect to being a climate smart nation. Whether or not that's the characteristic that's behind the decision making is another matter.
Great. Can we identify what their agenda is? Can we cross-check this information? Let's just get right to it. There's two real ways, practically speaking. How to become more critically information literate? One technique is to read laterally. This is a new term, which means checking multiple sources, basically. Why is this important? To step outside of the filter bubble. There's been a lot written recently on how Google and algorithms work, that like if you look up a certain phrase, that you can kind of go down a rabbit hole down a certain way of looking at the world, or you can look at information, and climate change is a perfect example of this, that you can just find information that corroborates your own experience. To another big piece of, so reading laterally, and there's a great crash course video on this that I can share. If you're, instead of just looking at a source, you're looking at multiple sources that try to say the same things. You kind of pull out of that one source and then re-engage with another source of information. Another way that they suggest, or researchers suggest, is follow information upstream. So many news sources report from other sources. Re-report news. Can you find the original source? If you can't, that's not necessarily good. 3, another really important one that Dana Boyd actually says is, or that David Gubler says in How to Teach Information Literacy amidst a culture or amidst the sea of lies, is to understand our own cultural biases. Not cultural, I'm sorry. It's way harder. Confirmation biases. We know what confirmation bias is, right? Can someone define that for me in your own terms?
It's just like where you only accept information that's proving your point.
Yes. When we accept information we already agree with and dismiss information that we don't agree with. Has anybody seen this, I don't know, in say political conversations that have happened in the past forever? What do we do for this? Actually, this is really interesting in terms to, you want to actively look for information that disrupts your biases. Find all the reasons you should vote for Trump if you don't like Trump. Find all the reasons you should vote for Biden if you don't like Biden. if we were able to do this, or if we were able to kind of get out of our own narrow understanding and see from other perspectives, it becomes not a this or that. When we see like that polarization, it's very dangerous because we just get solidified in the way we see the world. And ideally, we're trying to expand and open our understanding to account for a lot of different sources of information. The other really big piece here is to understand, oh no. That there are incentives behind publishing certain information. I'm going to say power relations to encompass a whole lot of ideas, but I'll say it the way my dad said it now. Follow the money. Who is going to gain from this information being out there in a certain kind of way? What do we have to gain by sharing or spreading that information now that we are spreading information that engages us? Did we see this? Did anybody get to watch A Social Dilemma on Netflix after we talked about that? They do that really well in understanding how it's a good, if you get fired up about this topic, and some students usually generally do, and some students generally do not. But if this is something that's interesting to you and identifying what information you can trust and what information you cannot trust, I would watch that, The Social Dilemma, partially to understand this. So what we're working on here is critical information literacy. Like here's, let's give an example here. Evaluating sources in a post-truth world, ideas for teaching and learning about fake news. I don't want you to look at anything except this picture. Fukushima nuclear flowers. Not much to say here. This is what happens when flowers get nuclear birth defects. Does this post provide strong evidence about the conditions near Fukushima Daiichi power plant? Explain your reasoning. This is given to high school students. What do we think?
I don't know. Like maybe if there were more plants that got affected, or like even animals, I'd be more persuaded. But this could just be like a random genetic modification.
Good.
Or like,
agreed. Other critiques of this information as it's presented to us.
There's not much info. Just okay. The person says there's not much to say here, so
do we
that's
know
a red
where?
flag.
Do we know where this photo was taken?
No.
So there's a problem. Have we heard about deep fakes? Side note.
No.
Holy. So this is, I was looking for other resources to help teach media literacy. What is media literacy? How to separate fact and fiction online. And they had a whole section on, this is on hoax websites. The Onion. I saw that The Onion posted that we're going out of business because we can't make up news stranger than the news that's already happening. I don't know if you guys follow The Onion, but it's fantastic. Questioning fake news. Facebook to ban deepfakes. Deepfakes is the use of fake video presented as real video. And video editing is becoming so good that I can create a deepfake of Michelle Obama saying things that she did not say. And it looks like it's her speaking, but it's not. It's actually a fake video. This is hugely concerning for a lot of people that are already worried about how people can find all the information that they want to support their claims. And you thought fake news was bad? Deep fakes are where truth goes to die, according to The Guardian. So technology can make it look as if anyone has said or done anything. Is this the next wave of misinformation warfare? So there is a lot on this. There is a lot on lateral reading on how to basically do that, which is to, this is from a study that Stanford did where they asked college students, fact checkers, professional fact checkers that fact check for a living, and college professors, I think. And they asked them, they showed them different websites and they asked them to assess whether or not the websites were trustworthy or not. And the college professors didn't do very much better than the college students, and both of them did pretty poorly at being able to identify whether or not the websites were actually real or legit. And the fact checkers did really well. And what the fact checkers did that the college students and the college professors did not do was that they got out of the site that they were on and started looking for things about that site. So if we find, for our notes here, and I can say that again, whoops, for lateral reading, you're not only checking multiple sources to step outside the filter bubble, you're researching about the information and the source of that information. So you find information about the Fukushima, whatever plant or whatever that was, then I'm looking for that in other sources, and I might research, where did this information come from? Is this a generally reliable source? We have gotten like the hierarchy of reliable sources, right? We should have gotten that in CL 150, like what sources are most reliable and why. Did we get this? Do we need to go over the hierarchy of reliable sources, like what sources are the most reliable and why you should use them, all that kind of stuff? Is that review, or does anybody feel like you need that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, give us a crash course. That'd be good.
Okay, so most reliable sources. Let's just use, what are the most reliable sources? And I want us to, this is going to connect to this idea of critical information literacy is understanding the incentives behind publishing information. So we're going to see that.
Would it be like publicly funded websites?
Close.
Or something like that?
Yes. Publiclyfunded.org. Publicly funded sites are up here for sure. .org. .orgs.
Whenever I've been looking for sources, I've always looked for like, .org or .edu. I don't know.
Great. Educational sources .edu. Other ones, government sources are typically very reliable, although that has changed, or it's changing based on funding and the politicization of government websites, which made big news when Trump administration erased all mentions of climate change on the when he took office on the government websites. There's a big giant one. Most reliable sources we can get.
Scholarly articles that are
There we
vetted
go.
by professionals.
There we go. And what makes a scholarly article? It's peer reviewed.
Yeah, right. My bad.
So scholarly, and that's fine. Scholarly articles are journals that are peer reviewed, which means in order to get published in a peer reviewed journal, it has to go through a vetting process to make sure that it is published and that it is legit. So this is the sense, if I go to lib.colostate.edu, and I can go to databases. So we can go to A to Z database list or database, depending on how you want to say that. And I can search on this left, I can search Academic Search Premier, Google Scholar, Web of Science. Google Scholar is fantastic. It's going to ask for my login information. This is the best way to find. It's going to ask you, if you go to Google Scholar through the library, it'll ask you for your login information, and then you can use Google Scholar through the library. And I want to do something like, I want to look up ePortfolio. Actually, let's do information literacy. We're going to do a whole day on help on researching and research strategies, because I just want to be able to, 7,242 results on information literacy. And I can sort between, I only want to see scholarly peer-reviewed journals. Oh, that's what I actually, under source types here, there are academic journals, reviews, trade publications, books. Is that it? Okay. Evaluating the relationship between information literacy and evidence-based nursing and their impact on knowledge and attitudes of nurses working in hospitals affiliated to Kerman University Medical Science on Medication Errors. Okay, they have supposedly very little incentive to lie or misrepresent the truth here. In fact, their incentive is for truth, which is why they're trusted. So a scholarly peer-reviewed journal is like 5 stars because the incentive is truth itself and the forwarding of truth within a particular discipline. Government sources are also usually 5 stars as well because their incentive is truth itself. Again, we could give educational sources like .edu are pretty good. That was the first thing that I found when I was looking at, this is actually a .com, but the way they set this up and how the way this website is presented, where it's not really making any claims, it's just giving me a ton of resources, seems pretty trustworthy to me. It seems like their incentive here is to get me to just get those resources, which is exactly what I wanted. What we're trying to practice is to understand why and how people would. News sites, media news sites, which is .coms, or other personal blogs, which are .coms or other things, are highly variable, from anywhere between 1 to 5 stars. Some of them are really good, and others of them are not really good, because we have the ideas of bias and incentive creep in here. What do I mean by incentive? And we need to move on. This is a particularly troubling one for me, but I'm going to share it anyway. Think before you pink. Has anybody encountered this full-length documentary?
No.
Have we seen, like, I'm sure we've seen breast cancer awareness campaigns that are like all the pink ribbons everywhere and everything. That seems like completely innocuous. But basically, it's a documentary about breast cancer awareness campaigns and the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Which is actually incredibly, this is where it gets so freaking crazy. basically, they advocate for early detection of breast cancer, and they help people with information, and they're educational about detecting breast cancer early and providing resources to help fight breast cancer. And the documentary makes the argument that you should think before you engage in their campaigns, mainly because they're actually funded by some of the largest chemical polluters in America. Companies that are responsible for introducing environmental toxins into our environment, or basically introducing environmental toxins that cause cancer. These toxins can be found in beauty products, household cleaning products, and so on and so forth. So this is an example of basically this organization has an incentive to completely not talk about environmental toxic pollution that is causing cancer, and instead talk about what women can do to help prevent cancer. I don't know, like, I don't think you can discover this on your own. But it just raises the question. Every issue has a lot of different angles to it. And when you're looking at something as complicated as cancer, you would want to, if you were really thinking critically, you could ask, why do they want us to think this? What incentive do they have? What do they get if I believe this? What do they get if I share this? What do they get if I agree with what they're saying? This documentary was really disturbing in that how well they have controlled the narrative about breast cancer to prevent anyone from talking about limiting environmental pollutants that would cost these companies a lot of money to actually do. Which again, I mean, we are in an election season where misinformation is pretty rampant, and it's very difficult to kind of differentiate between all this. Okay, we need a transition. I hope, in your own words, can you identify information as just exactly what it sounds like, but this is also, this information is presented in the internet and media. Oops. Critical information literacy, so it's not just the ability to read information. I can read information that the Breast Cancer Foundation puts out. That's literacy. To understand and begin to unpack the system of power, here it's follow the money. Who is making, why would they do this? Like, what kind of financial incentive is valuable for this person? Usually it takes investigative journalism to uncover something like this, because I would never imagine that a breast cancer foundation would have a financial incentive to skew public opinion towards something that they actually want, which is exactly what we do today. This is also another, if we haven't heard of this term, this is something that I think we all should hear about, called astroturfing. It's when you basically, it's fake green organizations. There's a lot of organizations that say that they are green or that they're doing things because they're for the environment, when really actually they're not. And that's been a lot of ways. The Tea Party is another example of that organization on the surface. What it looked like was all about tax fairness, but it was really, and they made it seem like it was from grassroots organized Americans that were for tax. That's what we saw when we saw the Tea Party. I don't know if this is before your time, if you remember this reference. But that was one of the first really big examples of giant corporations creating a grassroots organization to advance their corporate goals, which is really to reduce taxes and to reduce regulation so that they could make more profits, which isn't necessarily bad depending on where you're sitting in that relationship. Okay, why for some issues that you're going to be researching, this critical information literacy piece is not really that significant, except that, you know, a healthy democracy or in healthy representative democracy or whatever it is that we have is republic. Like information it helps us to have information and actual information. You know, it's kind of almost a life or death issue, especially if you've been impacted by cancer or other issues like that. But I am realizing this is just a lot of information. So if you're practicing critical information literacy, you should be asking yourself, what incentive does my professor have in giving us this information? America. And I care about our environment, and polluters in particular have devised incredible ways to take the focus off the fact that they're polluting. And it's freaking crazy. Have you seen the BPA, no BPA, BPA free water bottles and all of that? We use more chemicals that have not been tested. So we found out that BPA can lead to cancer and other bad things. And so we banned it, and we replaced it with 10 other chemicals that we haven't even tested. So that's the state of our, and if you're interested in that, the ewg.org, it's an organization that stands in for our FDA in our country has been we can't really trust the products that we get. They have a really nice guide it's the Environmental Working Group. They are a nonprofit, donation-based group that is trying to make our environment less toxic. And this Dirty Dozen and Clean 15 is a really cool resource that you can kind of see what foods that are highest in pesticides that you should buy organic, and foods that aren't high in pesticides that doesn't really matter if you buy organic. Okay. This lesson plan's terrible. We have 6 minutes now to discuss so hopefully, does anybody want any help discussing your issues or any questions about any of this?
Maybe helpful ways to brainstorm, just come up with a lot of inquiries and then pick from because
The best one that I've seen is visual mind maps. Well, it's going to be hard to do okay, so I would get a piece of paper, physical paper, not text thing. And then you have one inquiry that let's say you're still interested in reading more. So I'm going to put that big at the top of the page. You can't see that, but it's in a bubble. It's like a thought bubble that says reading more. And now I'm thinking about what's connected. When I say reading more, and we'll all do this together. When I say reading, what words pop up to you?
Like habits.
Good.
Time.
Good. I'm gonna put that next to more. Keep going.
Literacy.
Good. Keep going.
Like fiction versus nonfiction.
Great. Keep going. Anybody? Reading more. What else do you think about?
Maybe like intelligence even.
Love it. Let's take intelligence and reading because that one caught my mind. When I say intelligence plus reading, what do you think about?
Like how reading increases your vocabulary or something like that.
Yep, I love it. How does reading connect to intelligence? Is my big question here. And then next to intelligence, I have vocabulary. That makes me think of school, honestly, where we learn how to read. And that makes me think about homeschool and public school. Also makes me think of research up here. And okay, so can we see this? Basically, you don't need to see what the words are. It's just like it's like a bunch of bubbles that are connected with lines on one side of the page, and on the right side of the page, I'm starting to generate questions that are connected to those bubbles. So one of the reasons this puts all of our thinking in a physical space that I can then connect. So I have habits, school, reading, and intelligence. And I'm wondering, then I can think about, like, for me, I'm interested in the school bit. So I have new questions around that would be like, how do we, what's the best way to teach this? Or how do we engage students in that? So this is called, where did that brainstorming go? This mind mapping is one way to do it.
So, and with your like inquiry or research question, it's more of like a rhetorical thing, right? Like you don't necessarily have to answer it.
Correct. A good inquiry question, thank you for that question, is not a yes or no question. Or if it is a yes or no question, is that you don't know the answer to. So a rhetorical question is a question that you use to make a point. Like, what are you, stupid? I don't really want you to answer that question. I'm just trying to tell you you're stupid. So it's not a rhetorical question, and I'm not saying that. Please don't misunderstand me. It's just the example I came up with through my head. A rhetorical question is a question I'm using for rhetorical force. An inquiry question is a question that helps you dig deeper to get more information. So a question like, how can I read more, or how can we teach students how to read more, is a good one because I have no idea how to do that. Is school a place where we should teach students how to read? I don't know. Are there other alternatives to learning how to read in school? Like, are there reading clubs? I don't know. Are there reading clubs in college? Is that a thing?
I've ever heard of.
I'm not sure either, but might there be? Okay, so I have this question that says, like, how do I learn how to read more? And it's this big question. And as I'm researching, I find this article on the establishment of reading clubs in Nova Scotia. And I'm like, oh my God, Nova Scotia reading clubs, this is amazing. And now so basically you don't need to know what your paper or what your project is going to be. You basically have 4 weeks of exploring the internet, the wilderness of information on the internet, to find something that's super interesting to you that might look good to a future employer if you're going a professional route. So you don't need to know where you're going. You just need to be excited about the direction you're going in. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think it does.
So you don't need to like I don't need to know what your thesis is yet. In fact, it's probably better if you don't know what your thesis is yet.
Okay. So, like, if my question was, like, how to read more or how can I read more,
Yes.
could I then talk about, like, education and reading clubs and something else, like, how it improves your vocabulary and then, like, habit forming, like, all of those things?
Yeah, you very well could. Or it could, and that could be partially a dead end, and you might find like something on single-celled organisms that is really fascinating to you, and now you're doing that. So yeah, your initial research topic proposal is just to try to get you thinking about what do you want to spend more time doing more of. I also brought in all of this critical information literacy thing because you can do a advocacy campaign. So if you are like me and you want to get toxins out of our environment, I could make my site about regulating polluters. Or I can make it about deregulating polluters because my uncle works in vinyl manufacturing and they happen to be polluters, but you know what? We need vinyl. And I don't want my uncle to lose his job. So you can do like something that you're passionate, that you want to learn more about. That's what we're trying to do. This is disconcerting because most of the time, like you're told what you should be reading, and I'm intentionally at this point, like turning you loose to read whatever it is that you're interested in reading and presenting that in a way that might look good to a future employer. Or just presenting it in a way that's good for you, that you're getting something out of. You really have a lot of leeway here. Any other ideas, or is anybody stuck, or other questions that brings up? Because that was a really good question, Jason. How many people know, I'm going to stop the share here. I'm curious to see, can I get a thumbs up from people that know what they want to research generally? Like they feel like they're going to be able to go find information on their topic, at least to start. And a thumbs down for people that have no idea what they're doing. So for the thumbs down one, there's some obvious places to start. One, I would ask, why did you choose the major that you're in? You don't have to answer that question, but that's why. Why that major? Is there a question in your field of study that is interesting to you? Start with that one. What course would you wish CSU offered that you could kind of do on your own? It's another one. Another potential inquiry question for you is, what makes you mad? What makes you happy? If you could wave a magic wand and change something about the world, what would you change? Because then we have an inquiry question, how? How do we change that? I wish students were more curious myself. How do we do that? Not to say that you're not curious, but I think our public education system is trash. Or not trash, but just misguided.
Trash.
I honestly, it's trash, but I had a great time. I had good teachers and good friends. But then again, I went to Pooter School District in Fort Collins. It's very well funded. And then I studied education and learned about the savage inequalities in the United States. And I'm like, oh my God, there literally are 2 Americas, and I've never even been to the other one. Has anybody been in a city where you go to the other side of the tracks, literally, and it's like, holy shit, this is a different city than that side of the tracks? I never
Yeah.
experienced that until I was like 20. And it's crazy. So here's the other thing you can do. If you are choosing between different ideas or you are lost, you have to write them down. So do not just spin off in your head. Either make like something like this where you're just mind mapping all of your messy ideas, and notice this is messy, it should be messy. Or if you're thinking about multiple things, write them down. And as you get a question, write it down. Just go crazy. Then you'll have a lot. The cardinal rule of brainstorming is that you never dismiss an idea. If you're in a group brainstorm and someone says, I don't know about that idea, be like, you don't know how to brainstorm. You don't get to say whether this idea is good or not. We do that later. Just brainstorm everything. Then later you can be like, that's weird, but not when you're brainstorming. You want to open up the valve as wide as you can. Any other questions? Your research proposal is due on Sunday. You can change your research topic at any time, just like life. If you decide plumbing's not for you, you can get out of plumbing. The average American will change careers 7 times. So if you're beating yourself up over choosing the right major, you're not alone. Don't beat yourself up over choosing the right research topic. Just pick something that you are interested in and start reading about it. That's all I'm asking you to do. You don't need to know where it's going. Hopefully you find something on the internet that you didn't know existed. Like, oh my God, microplastic, anthropogenic microplastic cleanup is a thing. Now I'm really into this. So I would like for you to discover something that you didn't imagine was there and then go forward with that. That's usually the best research papers. They start kind of big and who knows, and then something really cool happens. And then you get excited, and that's what school should be. Cool. I'm going to stay on just for longer to talk about anybody's topic because I do think hearing other people's topics is valuable. And I really like Jason's. The idea of how to learn how to read more seems like a really giant, massive topic, but it's a good place to start because there's some personal interest there. And I don't know where that's going to lead. It might lead to educational reform. It might be just personal, a personal compendium of resources to help you read more. I feel like that might be really valuable to somebody. Other ideas or questions about what you want to do? Connor, are you doing something on real estate?
I've been thinking about it. I honestly am still trying to come up with my research question, but I would like to just because it interests me.
Yeah, I think you should.
Yeah, what would you like? I mean, obviously you're not going to come up with my research question, but like, where would you steer me?
I mean, I would look up investment strategies for different kinds of people.
Okay.
Like, what are real estate investment strategies? Honestly, you could look at financial aspects of real estate as well. You could look at real estate trends.
Literally anything.
Literally anything. You also could look at like how to establish like the process of becoming an agent or the best way, like, what am I trying to say? Like, what do you need in your professional development as a real estate person? What are you interested on your professional path? What are you curious about? Could also be like, who are the best real estate agents to work with? What are the various ways to work in real estate and which one's most interesting to you? All of those would be completely legit places to start.
Awesome.
I mean, for me, I would go like the financial long-term investment strategy aspect of it.
How to set yourself up for the future.
Exactly. Because if you know that, you can communicate that to future clients.
Sure.
I would also go with like, I mean, the question I'm working on right now is how to form, and so you can help me out. If you want to help me understand the best financial way to form partnerships to invest in real estate um, that would be cool, because that's what we're working on right now. Is how to basically buy real estate in partnerships, and the best way to do that to reap the biggest tax benefit.
I actually really like that topic.
Well, that would help me out. So tell me what you figure out.
Alrighty, I'll put in some work for you.
Thanks. Put in some work for you first, and then if I get something out of it, then that'll be good.
Awesome. I will.
All right. See you, Connor.
Well, thank you very much.
See you, buddy.